What's up? Today I'd love to talk to you about the most common opening position and the way for you to win the game so easily, because I see that people keep making the same losing mistakes and their opponents often don't even know how to take advantage of that. Alright, so let's think about a position like that. Very often on amateur level, you got this position or something very close, okay? It is white to play, and let me ask you first of all about this. How would you play here if you are playing white? Just think about this for a second, okay? A lot of players would love playing bishop g5 here, putting this pin, and they don't really know that this can be a losing mistake if black knows how to take advantage of that. So we'll talk about that in a second. There are also other people who say, okay, I'm worried more about black playing this move, so let me prevent this by playing pawn h3. And they also don't realize that there is a winning plan for black here very often in similar positions. If you aren't sure what I'm talking about, no worries, I'm going to explain this in just a couple minutes. Alright, let's flip the table so that we can see how you can take advantage of those errors if your opponent plays them. So, what is wrong with the move bishop to g5? Put in the pin. Looks very advantageous for white, right? Put in the pin, potentially threatening knight d5 and, increasing the pressure over here. Everything looks good, but white just didn't play this move at a proper time. That's the problem. White should have waited for black to castle first and only then play this move bishop g5, because if white plays this move prematurely, black can expand on the kingside easily by playing pawn h6, driving this bishop back, and then pawn g5. If there is black's king on g8, this pawn advancement would be, weakening black's king and would be a double-edged move, But right now, black's king is over here on the center of the board. There is no problem for black to play g5. And what it does is a couple of things. First of all, it neutralizes the spin, of course, because now the bishop has to retreat. Secondly, if you just look at this bishop, you can realize that it is in the cage. It has no moves to play, right? Black's pawns are doing a great job restricting the bishop. And also, it's even pretty hard to realize how can this bishop get back to life somehow. How can white relocate it to a better position, right? There is really no way. So that is already the first advantage that black achieved. Here, now black can play bishop g4, a symmetric move, but it is kind of stronger because white cannot play, the same h3 and g4. The bishop is also blocking this pawn from going to g4. So in most cases, white plays here pawn h3, but black just maintains the pin. And now white is feeling uncomfortable about this opposition. They don't want to castle because black will go knight d4, and white's in trouble. And according to database, most players played queen d2, trying to get away from the pin, but now black can actually simply take here, ruin white's pawn structure, and now after knight to d4, white has numerous problems. Knight takes f3 is a major threat, which will be a fork to the king and queen. There is no convenient way to defend this pawn anyway. Also, this bishop on g3 is still completely stuck, and there is just no way for this bishop to get anywhere. If it goes, all it can go is h2 and g1, right? There is no other route for the bishop, so that already gives black a completely winning game. Alright, now let's move on to the next idea. Let's say your opponent knows or just randomly guesses that bishop g5 is not the way to go here and simply castles. Alright, now after your opponent castled, it is fine to go bishop g4 and put this pin, because now going h3 followed by g4 is already a more committing move for white. White can still consider that, but there is a downside because that weakens the king. There is still an interesting thing here to be aware of. So what is black's plan? Well, we want to take advantage of this pin, so we want to play knight d4, take over here on f3, destroy white's pawn shield around their king, and then to attack, right? So that's what black is going to do. So if white wants to stop that from happening, they gotta, be aware of that and perhaps play something like bishop e3 to take control of this square. So if the knight goes there, white can at least simply take it. And that would keep white's position normal. Another thing to consider is that white really wants to keep the option g4 possible, so that if this pin ever gets uncomfortable for white, white can actually push the pawn forward and neutralize it. So if you're playing this with white, you want to keep this move available. You don't want to block this pawn. And which brings us to another very common error. Very often, and I think it's the most played move here in this position, is the move bishop to g5. White wants to put the same pin and take their own revenge, saying, hey, you put this pin and I want to do the same. But here the problem is, after black goes pawn h6 and bishop h4, we already know that bringing this bishop over there before black castled very often backfires, such as in this case. Black can go g5, And it helps in many different ways. Once again, this bishop is caged. Also, potentially black can push g4 in some variations and open up more files on the king side. But in this position, knight to d4 is simply winning, because again, this bishop is now blocking the pawn and can't go forward, and neutralize the pin. Since this move is impossible, the pawn cannot jump over the bishop. There is nothing white can do to neutralize this pin, and black will simply realize their attacking plan, destroy the pawn structure and attack without any problems. For example, white usually goes knight d5, which doesn't really change anything. Black can trade, play c6, keeping this bishop away, then play queen f6, putting in one more attack to this pinned knight, and now white is defenseless. So if white does something, let's say pawn c3, black can now realize their main threat, trade here, win a pawn. Now the king is completely exposed. We're also attacking the queen. If it moves, we can play something like h5 and, h4, g4, open up the g file and deliver a checkmate probably within a few moves. Of course, white could play some other defensive moves, but anyway, you've got a really strong attack, and I believe you can find proper continuation on your own. If you aren't sure how to do that, I've got a free masterclass where I share with you a single, simple technique for finding attacking moves, and I would recommend that you check this out so that you know how to find proper moves yourself without just relying on memorizing opening variations, which is something I would never recommend. Alright, now let me show you another really interesting thing here. Now we are in the database of games, and we can see the statistics of the most common moves played here in the bottom right corner. We can see that the most common move is bishop g5. We already know that it's wrong. After, if white plays this before you castled, you can play pawn h6, pawn g5 on the next move, and you're gaining an upper hand. Now, what if white does not play that move? We can see that the second really common move is the move pawn h3. White says, hey, I don't want black to play this move bishop g4, so I want to stop this from happening. So they play pawn h3. And as you respond symmetrically pawn h6, the next funny thing is that in most cases white here castles. And it is interesting because in the vast majority of the cases that gives you a winning attack. Now, I wouldn't go too far to say that, castling is a losing mistake for white, but in a real practical game, that is actually almost losing really, because your attack here is so devastating and it is really hard for white to stop it somehow. The move that I really recommend that you play here in this case is not any kind of castling or bishop a6, what people play, but the bold move pawn g5, which starts off this, really quick attack on the king side. You just want to go g4, open up the g file and deliver a checkmate. It's very simple, straightforward, and it's actually winning. You can see that in the vast majority of the cases, the statistics is greatly in black's favor. Black won 64% of games, 67, 74, so black is really winning here because it's so advantageous. For example, if white goes the main move bishop e3, you just keep pushing forward, pawn g4, after this exchange and bishop takes, now you have this pin, you have the g file open, and you have everything that you want to develop a quick and winning attack. Now here's one common game from this position that illustrates how black can finish the game off. White trading on c5, of course black recaptures, knight d5, doesn't really do anything because we still go with our plan, knight to d4, attacking this knight on f3. If white goes pawn c3, thank you, we were going to take there anyway. Now the king is completely exposed, we're gonna attack it. White play here king h2, trying to hide the king, but after an exchange on d5 and queen h4, now that is easily winning for black. White played rook h1, not sure why, rook g8, simply threatening, rook g2, queen g1, strange move, and now bishop to f1, checkmate. You can see how simple it was for black to attack with simple moves without any combinations, any calculation, just a simple and winning attack. Now over here I'll link a video where I'll analyze some additional variations that may occur in this position, so if you play this opening variation or something similar, you may love to check this out. Also subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already so that you don't miss out on future videos. Thank you very much, take care.